Hello, and welcome to So On and So Forth. I am Kathy, and today I'd like to share making some Valentine's Day pillows. I'm going to make 3 different projects, and perhaps you will find one that you would like to make for yourself. We're first starting off, I'm going to be using scrap, extra fabric. You can use scraps or you can buy a specialty fabric, but I have a lot of fabric that I have been making other projects on that was left over, so I decided to try to be creative and come up with something a little bit new. So for this first project, I am going to make an overlay heart pillow. I'll first start off by ironing my fabric. And this is just part of a fat quarter that I cut into, I believe it's a 10 by 11 rectangle. And by the way, you can download templates of hearts from the internet at any size that you would like. You'll notice that I'm going to use 2 different size hearts for projects tonight, and I just downloaded them from the internet and printed them. And I tend to print a light on one side and dark on the other so that it helps, depending on the shade of fabric that I'm using, it helps me to see the template. So that's just a tip. So I have my fabric here. It is folded in half, and I did press it, and I have a seam here. So the first thing I'm going to do is take my heart that I cut out already from the template I just showed you. Now this is a fuzzy fabric. I thought it would be nice, the texture on here. So I'm going to center it on this fabric, and you don't have to really be precise. It's just a project that we're making here to have a little bit of fun and be creative. You can measure if you want. I'm going to eyeball it, and I'm going to have about at least an inch on off all sides. And then what I'm going to do is take some pins and pin it in place where I want it. And you can put as many or as few pins as you find necessary. And we're going to sew all the way around the heart. Now I'm using a lighter thread so that you can see it, but you would go ahead and use a coordinating or matching thread so that your stitches are not seen. Also, with this particular project, you could use your zigzag stitch and that kind of makes sure you're getting all of this fabric. Now with the fur fabric, I kind of move it in where so that I can see where it's going. Also, it helps it from getting stuck under the presser foot. So here we are with that. Just fix my thread here quickly. Okay, and I use my scissors, just the tip, to kind of help me hold that fur back. Alright, so we're going to sew all the way around. And you can go slow and careful so that you get all the way around. Using a zigzag stitch. Its stitch length is 3 and I'm using the width of 3 as well. When I cut the fur fabric, I cut from the wrong side of the fabric, and then when I turned it over, I brushed it because it makes a mess when you cut, and then I trimmed it down to where I wanted it to be. So that's just a tip. I'm pivoting at the point of the heart and working my way up the other side. So we're almost done with this. Always lift your presser foot to pivot. And I just went over that center part just to give it a little bit more security. So we're all done stitching all the way around. We'll cut our threads. And always back stitch at the beginning of your stitching, unless you're doing a basting stitch. And so once we finish, cut your threads. And now that's sewn on very nicely. So locate your pins and remove your pins. There were 3. Something like this you have to remember. And you can look on the back and see where they are as well. It's not the back anymore, it's going to be the inside now. Okay. So now that we have sewn this on and it's secure, isn't that nice? Lovely. So now we're going to flip it right sides together. And it should look like this. And we're going to pin it. Let's start in this corner. And what we're going to do is leave an opening on one of the sides. Oh, about, let's see, about 3 inches, 3-inch opening. And then the rest we'll pin it all the way around. Once we pin it all the way around, we'll sew it using about a 1/2 inch seam allowance. And then we'll be closer to finishing up our pillow. And you can put in as few or as many pins as you like. It's not always necessary to put a lot of pins. So we'll start right here on this part. Again, we're going to do about a 1/2 inch seam allowance. And I'm going to use a straight stitch this time. Set at 2.5 length. And we will begin by back stitching at the beginning. And then we'll back stitch when we stop for the opening, which is here. So let's get started. up, and we'll begin stitching here. And again, we're going to have a back stitch at the beginning of this stitch here. So put our needle down. Needle down when you pivot. And that's just to keep your fabric good and straight. And then we'll go all the way. Never sew over pins, needles. Pivot with needle down. Just lift your presser foot and turn the fabric. Back stitch at the end of this. So we've sewn all the way around, and now we're going to trim our threads. And we also want to trim our corners. So we just make a cut on the corner there. Just be careful not to go into your stitching. And that'll just help your corners stick out nicely, nice and pointy when you turn this right side out. Okay, so we are ready to turn this right side out. So that little opening that we left, just reach in there. And I put my thumb right up in one of the corners, pinch it and pull it through to the other side. And then just start pulling it out, right side out. Be careful, but go ahead and go for it. Sometimes, because we have this faux fur attached, it might be a little difficult, but not impossible. Just tug a little bit harder, but not too hard. And sometimes turning it right side out can seem like forever, but you can get it done. Just be patient. Keep working with it. Turn and twist and coax it on out of there. And before you know it, you've got it turned right side out. I like to go in and again get each corner with my thumb and push it through. You can use a chopstick. I do have a turning tool. There are turning tools, but you can use a chopstick, a pencil, some blunt object that you can poke in the corners and help get them out. And then give it a nice shake. Now at this stage you can give it a press if you want to. Trim off any loose threads that may be from the sewing or fabric fray. But just trim those. And so now what you have here is a cute pillow here. You will stuff this pillow with polyfill. And stuff it to as puffy as you like it, as firm as you like it, or as flat or loose, or however you want your pillow. It's up to you. That's the beauty of sewing things yourself. And then once you get it filled up, you will sew around the edges to close up that opening. Now you can do a ladder stitch, which is an invisible stitch just in that area, that opening area, or you can do a stitch all the way around on the sewing machine if you don't want to hand stitch. The ladder stitch or invisible stitch would be done by hand stitching, and if you're not familiar with that particular stitch, maybe I'll do a tutorial on that one at another time. Otherwise, you can sew it all the way around on your sewing machine so that we don't see where the opening is. Or if you don't mind knowing where it is, just sew that particular area on the sewing machine and go on. I know if you're just trying it for the first time and just want to make something, just go ahead and do it. But what we would do, we'll continue to stuff that pillow, and then here we would be. A nice Valentine's Day heart pillow. And it's fuzzy, so there's a texture and so forth. Hope you enjoyed that one. So our next project we're going to do, it's pretty much the same, but it's fabric and another specialty fabric. This is cotton fabric. It was a fat quarter. And then this is a specialty fabric, sequins. And you would use the same template right here. Cut out both pieces of fabric using your template. Place right sides together. Sew all the way around, leaving an opening. Once you sew all the way around and leave that opening, you turn it right side out. And then here's our opening over here. And we would begin stuffing this one with the polyfill until we got it to our desired puffiness. And make sure you get into the corners and all through so that it keeps its shape very nicely. And again, you can use a pencil or chopsticks or anything else to help move that polyfill around in there to get it the way you want it to be. Sometimes the bag of polyfill comes with a stick inside. You have to find it. It's in there though, and you can move the polyfill around inside your project. But you just work it in until you are happy and satisfied with the shape of it and the way it looks. And then you would use the same method as for closing up that edge. With this sequins, I would move toward hand stitching, that closing, that opening close. I would move toward hand stitching. But now we have our puffy sequin pillow. And the fun thing about this is texture. It changes color. I hope you can see that. And people love that. It's just comforting to change the color on a sequence up and down. We use these also in our fidget quilts. And so this is really nice. That's why I have a little leftover sequins for making fidget quilts. But there's number 2. Okay. So I have 2 more to show you. Actually, I'll just show you this idea because you already by now have the gist of putting these together. I still use the same template here and my 2 fabrics right sides facing, which I thought was a really nice fabric. And here I'm using the 2 techniques I just showed you. I'm using them together now. I'm going to stitch this heart onto the back of the back fabric, and then this is my front facing fabric, so I have something on the back of the pillow and something on the front. So you can do that. Also, I like to make pockets. So with this one, will more than likely just stitch from here around to here, leaving this part open so that it becomes a pocket. We can put, since it's a heart pillow and it's near Valentine's Day, we can put a little love note in there and stick it right in there, a little message, and that'll be fun. So that's with that one. And then once you sew this part on, whether you make it as a pocket or stitch it all the way down, you would put right sides facing, stitch all the way around, leaving an opening, turning right side out, and then stuffing, and then you would have this particular pillow with a pocket for a love note on the back. And so the final project I'd like to share with you today, they're smaller hearts. So this is the size heart that I'm using, smaller. And again, you can make it any size, any fabric, any way you want. These are just some ideas that I'm sharing with you that I thought were nice. And what I'm going to do is make a little pillow, but like a door knocker. So I fussy cut it. I fussy cut the fabric that I had from this panel here. I had a yard of this fabric, and I fussy cut it with the hearts here. And fussy cutting is just simply choosing a part of a pattern in the fabric that you want to use to focus on, and I just put my template over that area and then cut around it so that I would have these two. So that's with any fabric that has a print or something that you want to capture. It's called fussy cutting because you're fussy about where you're cutting because you want a particular part of the fabric. So that's all that is. So what I have here are some little ribbons, and I cut these about 6 inches each. And when I fold them in half, of course, they're 3 inches. And what I'm going to do is place the end of this ribbon right in that center point part there on the right side of it. And then I'm going to place the other half of this heart on top of there. So that should meet and be even. And a little bit of that ribbon should be poking out. We want to pin that. In place. And then we want to pin all the way around, leaving space for an opening. So be careful to match up the edges. And the bell, we want to keep the bell inside. So you'll end up working your way around to where you will lock the bell inside. And you don't have to add a bell, that's just an extra embellishment. Or you could put the bell on the inside with the fiber fill once you began to stuff it. You can put sachets in there, lavender, scents, and so forth. It's up to you what you do with your project. So now I'm going to start sewing. Let's see, we're going to leave our opening here. And you just need about, maybe an 1.5 to 2 inch opening here just to be able to pull it through. And I like to pull on, leaving a straight edge open as straight as possible. But the curves and the dips and everything, I like to keep those. Go ahead and sew those. So make sure your bell is tucked inside. And then you can begin sewing. take your time and make sure the bell is inside. Okay, so we're gonna get started. And if the bell pops out, because it probably will pop out that part that you left open, basically what I should have done before I started, I should have just tacked it down on the inside. But here we are now, right? So what I'm gonna do is put a pin right here so it won't slip through that opening part. Alright, so now we can go ahead and stitch. I'm going to use a straight stitch, back stitching at the beginning and the end of my stitches, and I am going to go slow. Really being careful. And then needle down, and you may have to lift the presser foot up a little just to pivot. This is a smaller piece, so it takes a little bit extra. When you get to that center part, lift your presser foot, needle down, and pivot. And if you have to stop and pivot, lift your presser foot, because turning the corners are not very easy, that's fine. Whatever works for you and makes your project successful is what you want to do. Now we're back around to our opening. We want to leave enough space to get that turned right side out. Trim your threads. You also want to snip the edges where the curves are to help your fabric fold a little better or turn out. So just on the edges, just snip. But just don't go into your stitches. Be very careful. But on the curves, make sure you go there. And then in that little dip in the center there, go down to the edge of there, and you can clip off the extra ribbon too. You don't need that on the inside, and that's just bulk. Make your project a little bulky. But continue to snip these edges up to your stitching line. And then we've made our way back to the other side. Now you could press this to set your stitches, but I'm just going to turn it right side out. And then all you need is a little bit of polyfill for this one. We'll stuff it. And you can make a lot of these little hearts like this. You can even make string them together like a bunting or a banner. So it's really up to you what you use these for. You can put them on the doorknob, and you hear the door open and close. You can have them as a mistletoe to use. You have a different kind of mistletoe. So whatever you want to do with these are just cute. Valentine's Day mistletoe. And then once you have it stuffed to where you want it, then you would go in, and this one you would really want to do hand stitching to close it up. And you would want to use a ladder stitch or an invisible stitch. I'm just going to pin it closed for now. And so there we have it. Several projects for Valentine's Day. I hope you make one or more and share them with me. Very nice. So there's 1, 2, 3, and 4. Thank you for joining me. Happy Valentine's Day. Bye.